Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us. We are getting into our Kickstarter conversation of the day. We have a number of new cities in name. And one of the biggest questions in this is how will these cities be financed? Yes, as regards to their infrastructure. To speak to us about this and more, we have Dmitry Pozidev, the head of the United Nations Capital Development Fund in Uganda, and Edison Masereka, who is the programs manager at the PFUD. Now, we would like to know what Mkutano is all about. Mr. Edison Masereka, what is Mkutano all about?
Yeah, thank you, Romeo, and morning to our viewers. Mkutano is basically a Swahili word meaning meeting to discuss an issue. And in this case, economic Mkutano means the issues being discussed are economic in nature.
So here you're discussing infrastructure development in the new cities.
Yes, we are discussing infrastructure development in the new cities, but also in Kampala, the current city. Yes, so the Mkutano is bringing together different stakeholders, partners, the private sector to discuss how do we finance infrastructure in cities, Kampala, the new cities, and also other local governments. Yeah, so that's the focus of this year's Mkutano.
And what is the inspiration behind Mkutano?
The inspiration behind Mkutano is that it's a forum that brings together everybody. It's an inclusive forum. You bring private sector, you bring civil society, you bring government, you bring local government to discuss, really to find solutions to pertinent problems, pertinent challenges that we are facing. So that's really what is unique about Mkutano, is that you're finding shared solutions for challenges that are pertaining to all of you. Yeah, and bring everybody's idea to the table. So that's what is unique about
speaking about shared stakeholders, we do have the United Nations Capital Development Fund that is also putting hands together with you and other stakeholders to ensure that we get onto this infrastructure development drive within the new cities. How do you plan to come up to bring this about, Mr. Dmitry?
Thank you, Romeo, and good morning to the viewers. This initiative is built on the efforts by many other stakeholders and partners, including the World Bank, that has been implementing, as you may know, the Uganda support to municipal infrastructure development for a number of years. We are working together with the Cities Alliance, with FMDV, the International Fund for Municipal Development, as well as other stakeholders to try to improve access of municipalities and the new cities in particular to alternative finance. What we have been observing in the past few years is quite a concerning trend when it comes to financing urban development. In particular, the share of the urban governments and local governments in general in the public budget has decreased from about 17 to 14% in the past 5 years. But what is also concerning is the increasing share of the earmarked funds, which cannot be used in a discretionary way. So this all poses this challenge of what municipalities and the new cities can do to get access to enough funds to finance their urban development.
So what happens when they do not get the funds that they need to embark on these infrastructure development drives?
Well, apparently what is happening, hopefully it will not happen, but of course the risks are that people will become very disappointed about the new development. The expectations, as we know,
of the city status.
The city status, the expectation is very high. But to meet those expectations, we do need also a lot of effort, including financing of urban infrastructure.
Edison, what are the key issues to be tackled by this Mkutano gathering?
This year's Mkutano is focusing on the new generation of development plans, as you may be aware. Like KCCA launched its development plan.
The different precincts of Kololo, I think I did watch the Kololo precinct.
And also the strategic plan for the next 5 years.
Right.
All the other municipalities and cities are developing these plans, the National Development Plan 3, 2020-2025. So all these plans are now in place. They have articulated the aspirations of the people, what they want to be delivered. The question is how are we going to finance these aspirations? So what will be tackled for this year is to discuss options, solutions. The situation has not been helped by the COVID-19 situation that we are in, which means even the resources are constrained. So for this year, we are trying to have a discussion on how innovative can we get in terms of finding new options, new solutions, new sources of finance. Can we tap through into the local private sector to also give a hand in facilitating these investments? So this year's focus will be on finding solutions, innovative options for financing. So that's what will be the debate. Some of them will focus on policy, others will focus on institutional strengthening and capacities. So that's what we're going to focus on.
And let's talk about the challenges you anticipate to meet on the way as you embark on this whole process. You also talk about getting financing from maybe other stakeholders like those in the local sector, and we know very well they've been battered very badly by the COVID-19 pandemic. Don't you think these are some of the challenges you're going to be meeting along the way?
Sure. Those are some of the really
and what else?
Challenges on the ground. The businesses have been battered, but at the same time, when they are battered, they require that we improve service, we improve infrastructure to help them get restarted. So there will be discussions on how innovatively we can do that, and at the same time support the private sector also to get out of this situation and get on their feet by providing improved services. So there are innovative ways that we can find, I'm sure, when we put our heads together as stakeholders.
Mr. Dimitri, what challenges do you anticipate to meet on the way that might frustrate this whole infrastructure development drive in the new cities?
Well, you know, much as the overall state of economy, particularly now at the time of COVID-19, is a concern, I believe that the major challenge is political willingness.
I see.
And political will. This is indeed, in most cases, is the major obstacle. We need policies and regulations that would be conducive to creating an investment-friendly environment at the city level. Think about what is happening at the moment from the regulatory point of view. Local governments and cities are extremely constrained in terms of incurring debt finance. As you may know, it is now limited to 25% of the local government's annual revenues. Now, changing that equation and revising that, linking it not to the total amount of debt incurred, but to the amount of debt service, will allow local governments and cities to contract 5 times as much debt, for example, which will significantly expand their opportunities for financing infrastructure. And this is also true for any other current regulations and policies, because you know, when we are talking about urban development and local government decentralization in principle, then the principle is funding follows function. If you assign a function to a local government, it should be adequately funded. Otherwise, what's the point of assigning that function?
Indeed. And also, Mr. Edison Masereka, I would also like to know, why is it important for cities to fund their own infrastructure?
Yes, I think cities are ideally viable economic entities, and therefore they should be able to generate sufficient economic return for them to be able to provide infrastructure that then continues to spur that economic development. So it's important that cities are looked at in that framework, that they can actually be able to stand by themselves and actually provide the required services and infrastructure for their citizens. So in principle, that should be the driving force behind cities. And so,
but as it is, given the fact that they are new cities, it might be hard for them to fund their own infrastructure projects. Would you agree?
Sure, that of course. But that's where you have partnerships, where that's where you now bring in other stakeholders and the central government, giving them a push in the initial stages, and other development partners were putting in resources so that you can kickstart that process, and eventually they will get to a point when they are self-sustaining and they can actually be able to finance their infrastructure requirements. That's the ideal option. That's the ideal situation, and we think that cities in Uganda will eventually get to that point.
Indeed, Edison Masereka, but then economic experts are worried that maybe this government is creating cities that they cannot take care of. With the whole way we are seeing them grappling with financing for infrastructure projects, it seems like we are creating cities we are not ready to take care of. No money, but still we are creating cities. Why?
And I think it's still a worthwhile effort to create the cities. I think it has happened elsewhere in many countries that cities start, of course, even great.
And then you look for the money.
Yes,
you create the city, then you look for the money later,
even great cities,
or vice versa.
Even great cities did not start as great cities. They started as small towns, as small municipalities, and then they are elevated, and then they are supported, and then they grow into big cities. So I don't think that is a problem for the cities to be created now. The most important thing is that we give them the necessary infrastructure, we give them the necessary policies to get them on a sound footing, on a sound start.
Mr. Dimitri, what is the take of the United Nations Capital Development Fund on this issue, creating of cities, yet we do not have enough funding to help them take off?
I believe you need to divorce these two issues, creation of cities and funding for infrastructure and development. And I quite agree with Edison that the decision to create new cities was probably overdue, because this is the reality. The municipality, as we have known them, are growing, they are developing, and potentially attaining the city status also opens up new opportunities. In terms of greater authority and greater autonomy, hopefully.
Indeed.
So that is there. But of course, as we've just discussed, the issue of financing urban infrastructure in those new cities and really transforming them into cities, like cities we know somewhere else in the world, is a challenge.
All right, Edison, how does this year's Mkutano fit into KCCA's transformative program on integrated local finances for sustainable urban development?
Yes, I think the Mkutano for this year really fits very well within the program. First of all, the program for integrated finances for sustainable development in the Greater Kampala Metropolitan Area is supported by the European Union. And what it is focusing on is really teach a man how to fish, so then he can always be able to fish for himself. And what we are doing is to support a KCCA, but also other municipalities in the GKMA, for example, to increase efficiencies on their revenue management. We are automating revenue collection systems for Entebbe and Nansana and Machinde Savagabo. So very soon our clients there will be able to pay their dues, taxes in the comfort of their homes. They can pay with their mobile money or mobile banking, whatever options that they find convenient. Once we have all these processes automated. And with that, of course, fits the question of financing. So still we are on the same challenge. How do we address that? Through increasing efficiency at management, at local management level, but also to start to organize these engagements with different stakeholders to discuss additional options that we can deploy to be able to raise the required finances to finance these infrastructure requirements. As you said, yeah, the needs are growing every day. The needs are the demands are growing. The people are coming to the cities, and they will continue to come, and they expect services. And we have got to find solutions.
So ideally, the Mkutano gathering is geared towards resource mobilization for these various infrastructure development projects.
Correct.
But how many people are you targeting to attend this gathering?
For this year, we are targeting close to 300 people. Given the COVID situation, some will be in person. We will expect a number of people to join us online to participate through different online platforms that we are going to create. But in total, we probably reach over 300 people.
And what is the format for Mkutano?
For this year, for Mkutano, we will have it. It will be more of a discussion. So we will have a series of panels for experts to discuss pertinent issues. For the first day, we will have about 3 panels to discuss the different issues, and then generate some recommendations, agree on some options that we can take forward. And then on the second day, what would have been generated as viable recommendations, whether policy or institutional reform, will be presented to a higher level panel of policy makers and decision makers for them to give a view and also to start to make decisions on those recommendations.
Mr. Dimitri, let's talk about the effect of COVID-19 on these infrastructure development drives. How has COVID-19 affected resource mobilization for most of these infrastructure projects that you're working on?
Well, we have seen 2 trends in finance at the local level. As you may know, the major sources of finance in Uganda for local governments, including the new cities, are 2. These are own-source revenues, and we have talked about it, and also intergovernmental fiscal transfers, the grants coming from the central government. So we have seen a drop in both of their revenues.
Right.
Own-source revenues, this is probably can be explained because so many local government revenues are related to the level of economic activity. Let me give an example. If, for example, a fair share of your revenues comes from market fees and the markets are closed, then of course those revenues just dry up.
Indeed.
So one challenge is of course changing the structure of own source revenues, and this is what Edison mentioned when he was talking about land-based finance. But we are also observing with a lot of concern the drop in intergovernmental fiscal transfers. To give you the example of the Gulu city, this year the amount of grants expected from the central government has dropped by over 60% in comparison to the budgeted. So this is, in a nutshell, the impact that we are having: significant contraction of local government fiscal space, both in terms of own source revenues and in terms of central government grants.
And of course, Edison, I've looked at the Kololo Precinct Infrastructure Plan, I've looked at the Nakasero Precinct Infrastructure Plan, and what caught my eye is the fact that climate change was also inculcated in the whole project. So you're not negating the fact that infrastructure projects also have something to do with climate change. Go ahead with this, the inculcation of climate change, the aspect of the green infrastructure projects. Help us understand.
Yes, Romeo, that's very important, that development does not have to happen at the expense of the environment and escalating climate change challenges that we are facing. So we think going forward, we should be able to plan our cities, including Kampala, to be more sustainable, to be resilient to climate shocks. We know we experience such levels of floods in Kampala. These are not new to us, but we can address these challenges, and that's where we now focus more concretely on really integrating climate change issues and green infrastructure in all the development plans that we put out, that we are designing now. And probably, like you rightly said, that's what you saw in the precincts that we are now designing for Kololo and Nakasero and Makerere and Mulago, basically to make those areas resilient to climate shocks.
Indeed, and I was very happy as a conservationist, and I look forward to meeting the members of the Kampala Capital City Authority to expound on this conversation during the People's Parliament edition. Please make that happen very, very soon. The Ugandans want to hear more of that. And now, Mr. Dimitri, let's keep this conversation with some of the recommendations that are coming in from the United Nations Capital Development Fund on this issue.
Well, the 3 recommendations that we are trying to push forward, including through Mkutano, and this will be part of the high-level policy dialogue that we will organize during that conference, concern on attracting private capital for urban development in 3 respects. One is creation of subnational pooled finance mechanisms, kind of pooled banks, if you wish, that would be able to tap into primarily domestic capital markets. This, of course, requires enabling regulation, and this is where we need that political will that I have mentioned. The second area is the capacity of local governments and the new cities to contract debt. And I have already mentioned that we would need to revise the current approach to debt contracting, linking it not to the total amount of debt, but to the total amount of debt servicing. And the third area is really activating and enabling partnerships with the private sector. I know we have been talking about PPPs for decades, and of course the recent PPP Act has put in place the necessary preconditions and arrangements, but in reality, this has not happened, particularly at the local level.
I see.
Now, how to unlock that potential? How to make real capital really work for local development and urban infrastructure in a way that would be mutually beneficial, both to the public sector, to the public, and to the private sector. So these are the three big sets of recommendations, and we hope to create enough political momentum and political will to push this agenda forward.
All right, stakeholders are talking about public-private partnerships, and what about the Mkutano gathering? What are the expected outcomes? You can share with us some of those recommendations that you expect to come through during the gathering.
I think you, as Dimitri has indicated, some of the recommendations will be around increasing the momentum on improving efficiencies on in on-source revenue mobilization and management. Additional recommendations we expect will have discussions on how we can leverage urban land, which is the greatest asset of any city, to raise financing. Of course, the next set of recommendations will be on the policy issues and regulatory issues that will allow subnationals and local governments to also utilize the local capital markets to raise finance. Of course, the other recommendations will be on how to unlock the potential of private-public partnerships, particularly for subnational governments to be able to utilize that form of financing to finance infrastructure. So the set of recommendations will be along those four issues.
And when is the conference?
The conference is starting tomorrow Tuesday, and Wednesday. So tomorrow Tuesday 24th and Wednesday 25th.
Where shall we be?
We shall be at the Mistil Hotel in Kampala for the physical participants. But as I said, please, all the other participants will be able to join us online. The conference will be live, and you can join in using all the platforms, social media and all the other platforms that we will have.
Edson Masereka and Mr. Dimitri, many thanks for having made the time to speak to NTV. You come with a wealth of information on this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Romeo.
Thank you.
And you at home who is still watching Morning at NTV, want to thank you for that love and loyalty, but do understand we still have a lot more in the pipeline for you. We do have Daniel Kazibwe. Yes, he's seeking to unseat the Kampala Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago. Yes, we shall take a break and return with that conversation and a lot more. Don't move a